At 4:17 inches the morning, Dr. Elara Venn was given 6 hours to save the Alpha King's war beast. If the animal died before noon, King Caelan Rourke would order its body burned and every witness silenced. If Elara failed while treating it, the poison in its blood would kill her before the beast ever had the chance. The strangest part was not the sentence. It was that the creature had refused every healer in the kingdom, yet the moment Elara stepped into the execution yard, it lowered its head. Blackridge Citadel had turned its western courtyard into a cage. 40 soldiers stood along the walls with silver-tipped spears. 3 royal physicians waited behind a barricade, their sleeves still stained with the blood of the last man who had tried to approach. At the center of the yard lay Varkas, the king's legendary war beast. He resembled a wolf, only from a distance. Up close, he was larger than a cavalry horse, with black fur threaded by old gray scars and iron armor locked across his shoulders. His breathing came in broken pulls. Dark blood had dried beneath the plates. A faint blue foam clung to his teeth. Elara stopped 10 feet from the gate. "Nightshade compound," she said. The captain beside her glanced at the royal physicians. "They said battlefield fever. They were wrong. Can you prove it?" Elara looked at the dead healer covered by a canvas sheet near the wall. "He proved it for me." Captain Sabine Crow did not smile. At 40, she had the rigid posture of someone who had survived too many commanders and trusted none of them. A silver streak cut through her dark hair above one temple. "You asked for her," Sabine called toward the gallery. The man standing above them stepped forward. King Caelan Rourke wore no crown. He did not need one. At 47, he carried authority in the way he held still while everyone else watched him for permission to breathe. His black hair was cut short, his gray eyes hard with exhaustion. A pale scar ran from his right cheek toward his jaw. Elara had seen him only once before. 7 years earlier, he had stood on a platform in Hollowmere and praised the victory that had taken her sister. Now he looked at her as though he remembered none of it. "You identified the poison from 10 feet away," he said. "I identified the smell." "Then save him." Elara lifted her medical case. "Remove the soldiers." "No. He smells their fear. He has killed men for less. He is dying because men like yours kept treating pain as disobedience." A murmur moved along the wall. Caelan's expression did not change, but his hand tightened once against the stone railing. 20 soldiers stay," he said. 5, 10, unarmed. Sabine turned toward him. "My king, do it." The soldiers lowered their spears and withdrew until only Sabine and 9 others remained. Elara entered the yard alone. Varkas raised his head. Every guard shifted. Elara did not look back. She placed her case on the stones, opened it, and removed a shallow copper bowl, clean cloth, charcoal powder, and 3 sealed glass vials. Her hands were steady. Only the pulse at her throat betrayed her. Varkas watched each movement. "You know what they did to you," she said quietly. The beast's lips pulled back from enormous teeth. Elara poured water into the bowl. "So do I." She soaked the cloth, wrung it out, and moved closer. Behind her, a sword scraped against leather. "Touch that weapon," she said without turning, "and he will decide you are the greater threat." The sword stopped. Varkas's breath struck her face, hot and bitter with poison. Elara studied his eyes, his gums, the tension in his forelegs. He could still tear her apart. He simply had not decided to. She held out the wet cloth. "Your choice." For several seconds, nothing moved. Then Varkas lowered his massive shoulder. A soldier whispered a prayer. Elara pressed the cloth against the blood crusted beneath the edge of his armor. The beast shuddered, but did not strike. She cleaned one narrow strip at a time. The blood was too dark for a fresh wound, and too sticky to be his alone. Beneath it, the iron plate carried shallow scratches arranged in straight, deliberate lines. Not battle damage, writing. Elara leaned closer. The first mark formed an H. Her breath caught. She wiped harder. Hollowmere Ward Twen. The cloth slipped from her hand. Varkas's head turned toward her. His golden eyes narrowed, not in threat, but in recognition of her fear. Elara reached into her case and removed a pair of narrow iron keys. Behind her, Caelan spoke from the gallery. "What did you find?" She ignored him and unlocked the first buckle. Sabine stepped forward. Those plates have not been removed since the southern campaign. Then your king has been carrying evidence for 7 years. The courtyard went silent. Elara released the second buckle. The armor plate shifted, exposing fur matted with old blood and a row of objects trapped beneath the leather lining. Silver tags, dozens of them, small, rectangular, each stamped with a name and medical division. Elara picked up the nearest tag. Lucas Fernfield, surgeon. Another, Mira Toll, midwife. The third was bent through the center. Lydia Venn, relief physician. Elara stopped breathing. Her sister's tag lay in her palm. 7 years vanished. She was back in the doorway of their home, watching Lydia fasten that same silver tag around her neck before leaving for Hollowmere. Lydia had promised she would return in 4 days. The royal notice arrived 6 weeks later and called her an enemy collaborator. Elara had spent every year since trying to prove the notice false. Now the proof was warm from the beast's body. "Where did he get these?" she asked. Caelan had come down from the gallery. He stood beyond the gate with Sabine beside him. "I don't know." Elara looked up. "That answer has protected you for a long time." His jaw tightened. "I was told Hollowmere had been evacuated before the assault." "You were told?" "Yes, and you never checked." Something passed through his face then. Not guilt exactly. Recognition. Varkas groaned and collapsed onto one side. Elara moved before anyone else. She pressed both hands against his neck, counting the beat beneath the fur. His heart is slowing. She uncorked one vial and poured it beneath his tongue. Caelan stepped through the gate. "Stay back." "He is mine." "No, he is my patient." The king stopped. Elara mixed charcoal with water and forced small amounts between Varkas's teeth. The beast's body convulsed once. A black vein pulsed beneath his jaw. "Poisoned metal," she said. "The toxin is entering through the armor fastenings." Sabine looked at the plates. They were forged in the royal armory. Then someone with access wanted him sick enough to destroy the evidence. Caelan crouched opposite her. "Can you save him?" "Yes. If every plate comes off now. They are sealed by royal order." Elara met his eyes. "Then break your order." For the first time, Caelan hesitated, not because he doubted her, because men had built kingdoms around his refusal to reverse himself. Varkas's breathing weakened again. Caelan drew his sword. The soldiers tensed. He drove the blade beneath the nearest iron clasp and snapped it apart. "Remove them all," he ordered. For the next hour, king, captain, and physician worked on the stones together. Each plate revealed more tags. Not soldiers, healers. Children's ward attendants. Grain clerks. 2 schoolmistresses. A chapel keeper. The official history of Hollowmere claimed the town had housed enemy scouts and armed rebels. The names beneath Varkas's armor told another story. When the final plate came free, Elara found a narrow strip of black leather sewn into the lining. One end carried a broken wing emblem pressed in silver wax. She recognized it immediately. The same emblem had appeared on the sealed petition Lydia sent 3 days before her death. Elara had shown that petition to royal investigators. They called it a forgery. Caelan saw the change in her face. "What is it?" She held up the leather. "My sister's warning." Sabine went still. Elara noticed. It was small, a pause too long, a breath taken through the nose. But Elara had spent years studying people who lied before they died. "You've seen this mark before," she said. Sabine's eyes shifted toward Caelan. That was answer enough. Elara rose slowly. "Where?" Sabine said nothing. Caelan stood. "Captain, the old casualty ledgers," Sabine said at last. "The pages from Hollowmere were sealed under your authority." Elara turned to the king. Caelan did not deny it. "I sealed contradictory reports until the council could verify them," he said. "For 7 years? The border was collapsing. 3 provinces were threatening revolt. So you protected the kingdom. I prevented a civil war. And my sister became the price." His face hardened, but he did not look away. "If the reports had been released then, thousands more might have died." Elara closed her fingers around Lydia's tag. "That is what men in power always say when the dead cannot answer." Varkas lifted his head weakly and pressed his muzzle against Elara's shoulder. The gesture changed the courtyard. Soldiers who had feared her now watched Caelan, not with rebellion, with doubt. Caelan saw it too. "What do you need?" he asked. The sealed ledger. No. Elara laughed once, without humor. You asked me to save your beast while hiding the record that explains who poisoned him. The ledger cannot leave the archive. Then take me there. Not until Varkas is stable. He will be stable in 2 hours. By then, whoever poisoned the armor will know we found the tags. Sabine glanced toward the eastern tower. Again, too quickly, Elara followed her gaze. A narrow window stood open. A strip of white cloth hung from the sill. A signal. Lock the gates, Elara said. Caelan turned. Why? Because someone just warned the palace. The bells rang before he could answer. 3 low strikes from the archive tower. Sabine drew her sword. The ledger vault has been breached. Caelan moved toward the gate, but Elara caught his wrist. He looked down at her hand. Whoever is inside expects you to protect the archive, she said. Let them. What are you proposing? That we make them think the evidence is still there, and where will it be? Elara opened her case and removed a thin surgical blade. She cut the black leather strip free from the armor lining, then slid Lydia's tag and 3 others into the hidden pocket beneath her coat. Caelan's eyes narrowed. You are taking royal evidence. I am taking my sister home. If you leave this courtyard, you will arrest me? The question landed between them. Varkas shifted closer to Elara, placing his body between her and the king. Caelan looked at the beast, then at the soldiers watching. His authority remained intact. His certainty did not. Elara closed her case. I spent 7 years asking your court for permission to learn how Lydia died. I am finished asking. She walked toward the service gate. Sabine blocked her path. The city gates will be sealed. I am not leaving the city. Then where are you going? Elara held up the broken wing leather. To find the people this symbol was meant to protect. Caelan stepped behind her. If you disappear with those tags, the council will call you a traitor. She turned and met his eyes. Then decide whether you want the truth badly enough to be seen protecting one. The archive bells rang again. This time, flames appeared behind the eastern windows. Caelan looked toward the tower, then back at Elara. Go, he said. Sabina stared at him. My king? Caelan drew his sword and turned toward the burning archive. I said go. Elara crossed the service gate before anyone could change their mind. Behind her, the Alpha King ordered every entrance sealed and every council member detained. Ahead of her, beneath the inner wall of Black Ridge Citadel, the broken wing emblem had already been carved into a door she had passed 100 times without seeing. Lydia had not sent her a warning. She had left her a map. The door opened before Elara touched it. A woman with cropped white hair pulled her inside, shut the panel, and drove a steel bolt through the frame. The passage beyond was narrow enough for Elara's shoulders to brush both walls. Oil lamps burned behind red glass, casting the broken wing emblem across the stone. You are late, the woman said. My sister has been dead 7 years. Then you are very late. She moved quickly down the passage without introducing herself. Elara followed because smoke was already slipping beneath the hidden door. The tunnel descended beneath the citadel, passing old drainage chambers and forgotten cells. Names had been carved into the walls. Some matched the silver tags beneath Varkas's armor. Mira Toll, Jonas Reed, Elara Venn. Elara stopped and pressed her fingers against her sister's name. The woman glanced back. She carved it before leaving for Hollowmere. You knew her. I trained her. Elara's hand fell. Who are you? Ruth Calder, former royal quartermaster, current inconvenience. Ruth was nearly 60. Lean and sharp-eyed, with a limp she made no effort to hide. A ring of iron keys hung at her belt. She pointed toward the black leather strip in Elara's hand. That mark belonged to a relief network. Physicians, grain clerks, stable masters, anyone willing to move civilians when the crown refused to admit they were in danger. The court called them enemy collaborators. The court called many things whatever was convenient. They entered a circular chamber beneath the old granary. Shelves lined the walls, stacked with medical ledgers, supply records, and sealed jars. 6 adults waited around a long table. None bowed when Elara entered. A broad-shouldered man in a miller's coat reached for the tags in her hand. She closed her fist. Not until I know who you are. Survivors, Ruth said. The ones your sister helped move out of Hollowmere. Elara scanned their faces. Scar tissue. Missing fingers. Eyes that measured every exit. How many? 32 escaped through the relief tunnels. 11 are still alive. Why did no one testify? A woman near the shelves gave a bitter laugh. We did. The officers who took our statements disappeared. Then the king sealed the casualty reports. Elara looked at Lydia's tag again. Ruth's voice softened. Your sister stayed behind to bring out the final ward. Children and 2 enemy prisoners who had surrendered. That detail cut deeper than Elara expected. Lydia had always believed mercy should become hardest when it was least popular. What happened to her? We never found her body. Elara raised her head. Ruth placed both palms on the table. The official report said she died in the chapel fire. But Varkas carried her tag away, and that beast never took trophies. A faint vibration passed through the floor. Somewhere above them, a heavy door slammed. Ruth extinguished one lamp. The king's men are searching the lower levels. Elara, the miller said, we need the tags. You need evidence. We need leverage. That is not the same thing. Ruth studied her. Lydia said you were difficult. She meant careful. She meant both. Elara laid 3 tags on the table, but kept Lydia's against her palm. The armor was poisoned with a nightshade compound stabilized by silver salts. Whoever applied it had access to the royal forge and knew Varkas would be burned if he died. Ruth's expression tightened. Chancellor Merrick Dane controls the forge contracts. The name was familiar to every citizen in the kingdom. Dane had served 3 kings, negotiated the northern peace, and rebuilt the treasury after the war. He was the man Caelan trusted when he trusted almost no one. What does he gain by destroying the tags now? Elara asked. Control of the story, Ruth replied. The council's authority depends on Holomir remaining a military victory. And Caelan's? No one answered. That silence mattered. Footsteps sounded in the tunnel. The survivors reached for knives and crossbows. Elara took the surgical blade from her sleeve. The door opened. Caelan entered alone. His coat was streaked with ash. Blood marked one knuckle, but his sword remained sheathed. Every weapon in the room turned toward him. Ruth did not bow. You found us faster than your father did. I followed Elara. She stared at him. You let me leave so you could track me. I let you leave because the archive was burning. I followed because 3 council guards ignored the fire and came after you. At least one of them escaped, Ruth said. No. Caelan set a signet ring on the table. The crest belonged to Chancellor Dane's private guard. Elara looked at the blood on his hand. Did you kill him? He reached for a signal flare. That was not my question. Caelan held her gaze. No. Sabine has him. The room's tension shifted, not toward trust, but uncertainty. Ruth pointed at the ring. Dane sent guards below the citadel before anyone knew the tags existed. He knew, Elara said. Or he knew something under the armor could expose him. Caelan examined the carved names along the wall. When he found Lydia's, his expression changed. You approved the sealed reports, Elara said. Yes. The survivors began speaking at once. Coward. Mordara. King. Caelan did not reach for his sword. I was given 2 casualty ledgers, he said. One named Holomir as a civilian sanctuary. The other claimed enemy forces had converted its relief wards into command posts. And you chose the version that protected your campaign, Elara said. I chose the version signed by my field commander and royal examiner, because it was easier. Because 3 border provinces were preparing to secede, and an admission that royal forces had attacked a protected town would have shattered the army. Ruth stepped closer. So you buried the dead to preserve discipline. I believed an investigation would follow once the border stabilized. Did it? No. The word came without defense. Elara hated that honesty affected her. A lie would have been easier to reject. Ruth opened a drawer and removed a narrow ledger bound in faded blue cloth. This is Lydia's final inventory. Medicines, food, patient names, evacuation routes. Several pages had been cut out. Elara turned to the final entry. 4 carts sent through the east tunnel. Captain S confirmed passage. Remaining ward delayed by royal order. Captain S. Sabine. Caelan read over her shoulder. She was at Holomir. She told me she served in the Western Command. She did, after Holomir. A horn sounded above them. 1 short note. Too long. Ruth went pale. The lower gates. Caelan drew his sword. The wall behind the shelves shook under a heavy impact. "Dane's men?" Elara asked. "Not his guards," Ruth said. The council maintained a purge unit for places that officially did not exist. The second impact cracked the stone around the hidden door. Caelan looked at Ruth. "Another exit?" "One. It opens beneath the river mill. Take the survivors." Ruth hesitated. "And you?" "I will hold the passage." Elara caught his sleeve. "You cannot prove anything if you die under a granary. I can keep them alive. That does not erase what you did." "I know." The answer stopped her. He was not asking it to. The hidden door split inward. Caelan pushed Elara behind the stone pillar as armed men entered through smoke and dust. They wore no crest. Their faces were covered. The first raised a crossbow toward the table. Caelan struck the weapon aside. The room became movement and steel. Ruth dragged two survivors toward the river passage. Elara swept the tags into a leather satchel and shoved Lydia's ledger beneath her coat. A masked soldier lunged for her. She threw charcoal powder into his eyes, drove her knee into his thigh, and pulled the clasp from his cloak. A broken wing emblem had been burned into the skin beneath his collar. Not carved, branded. He caught her wrist. "Lydia should have stayed buried," he said. Caelan hit him hard enough to send him across the table. The words remained. Elara knelt beside the fallen man and tore away his mask. She knew his face. Royal Examiner Hollis Dane, the physician whose signature had authenticated the casualty ledger. He had been declared dead 2 years earlier. "You certified Hollowmere," she said. Dane smiled through blood. "I certified what kept the kingdom alive." "Who ordered the attack?" "You still think the order came from the palace?" He glanced toward Caelan. The king was not the only man with a royal seal. Dane crushed something between his teeth. Elara seized his jaw too late. His body convulsed once, then went still. The bitter smell of nightshade filled the air, the same poison used on Varkas. A third impact sounded in the outer tunnel. Caelan wiped his blade. "We move." They escaped through the river passage moments before fire consumed the hidden chamber. The tunnel opened beyond the citadel walls beneath an abandoned mill. Sabine waited there with 6 horses, and the captured guard bound across a saddle. Ruth stepped from the darkness and raised her crossbow. Sabine did not draw her sword. Elara held up Lydia's ledger. "You were the captain at Hollowmere." Sabine's face gave nothing away. "You confirmed the evacuation route," Elara continued. "Then someone ordered the final ward delayed." Caelan turned toward her. "Who?" Sabine looked at the survivors gathering behind Ruth. "I did." No one spoke. Elara stepped closer. "Why?" The east tunnel had collapsed. If I sent the last carts through it, every child inside would have drowned. "Then why does the ledger say royal order?" "Because I altered it." Ruth lowered the crossbow slightly. Sabine's voice remained steady. "I forged the first casualty record to make Hollowmere appear strategically valuable. I thought the council would exchange prisoners and send engineers before the enemy attacked." "You created the lie," Elara said. "I created a delay, and Dane turned it into permission." Sabine's eyes closed for half a second. "Yes." Caelan looked as though someone had removed the ground beneath him. "You signed the report I relied on. I signed it because Dane threatened to expose the survivors' escape routes if I withdrew it. Then you sealed the contradictory ledger before I could confess." The truth settled among them in layers, leaving no one innocent. Hoofbeats approached from the southern road. A column of council riders appeared beyond the trees. At their head rode Chancellor Merrick Dine. His silver hair was neatly tied. His dark coat showed no trace of ash. 20 armed men followed him, but he carried only a rolled parchment. "Elara Venn," he called. "I offer 11 surviving witnesses safe passage beyond the border. In return, you will give me the tags and the ledger." Ruth whispered, "He knows exactly how many." Dine smiled as though he had heard. "You have until sunset," he continued. "After that, the council will declare King Caelan compromised, Captain Crow a traitor, and every Hollowmere survivor an enemy conspirator." Caelan stepped forward. "You poisoned Varkas. I prevented a relic from dragging the kingdom back into a war it barely survived. You ordered civilians killed. I ordered a border secured." Elara looked from Dane to the frightened survivors. 11 lives, the evidence in her hands. A king whose silence had protected the crime. A captain whose lie had started it. Dine extended one gloved hand. Bring me the ledger at the old stone bridge. Come alone, and they live. At sunset, Elara walked onto the bridge carrying the blue ledger and every silver tag. Caelan waited hidden among the trees with Sabine and the survivors, exactly where Elara had told him to remain. Diane stood at the center of the bridge. "You made the correct choice," he said. Elara placed the satchel in his hands. Across the river, Caelan's face hardened. To everyone watching, she had traded the truth for 11 lives. Only Elara knew she had sewn a second document inside the ledger's spine, one bearing the royal seal Caelan swore had never left his possession. Would you condemn Elara for giving the evidence to Dane, or trust that saving the surviving witnesses had to come before exposing the truth, and why? Dane opened the ledger before Elara had taken 3 steps away. He expected names. Instead, he found blank pages. For the first time, his composure cracked. "What did you do?" Elara stopped at the end of the bridge and turned. "I gave you exactly what you asked for." Diane tore through the binding. The leather spine split beneath his fingers, revealing the second document sewn inside. His eyes moved across the first line. Then he looked toward the trees. "Come out, Caelan." The king stepped onto the road with Sabine beside him. Ruth and the Hollowmere survivors remained hidden farther back, beyond the range of Dane's archers. Caelan's face held no triumph, only understanding. Dane lifted the document. "You thought this would save you?" "I have not seen it before," Caelan said. "That is the problem." Elara walked back toward the center of the bridge. The document bore Caelan's royal seal, but the wax was older, darker, and impressed with a flaw no official copy should have carried: a narrow break through the left wing of the crown, the same broken wing stamped on Lydia's warning, the same mark branded into Examiner Dane's skin. "The royal seal used at Hollowmere was counterfeit," Elara said. "Not copied from Caelan's current seal, cast from the damaged ceremonial seal kept in the old council chamber." Dane's fingers tightened around the parchment. Caelan's voice went quiet. "Only the Chancellor had custody of that chamber." Dane gave a short laugh. "Custody is not guilt." "No," Elara said. "Your choice is." He looked at her. "You ordered me to come alone. You named 11 surviving witnesses when the official record says none survived. You sent men through tunnels that do not appear on any royal map, and you recognized the false seal before anyone explained what it was." The archers along the riverbank shifted. Dane's smile returned, but it had lost its warmth. "You think an assembly will convict me because a grieving physician asks clever questions?" "No." Elara looked toward the northern road. "Because the assembly is already listening." The first bell rang from Blackridge, then another. Across the valley, the signal passed from tower to tower. The old stone bridge had once carried royal proclamations to every district. Beneath its arches ran speaking pipes built for battlefield commands. Ruth had reopened them before sunset. Every word spoken on the bridge was being carried into the royal assembly chamber. Diane turned toward the river. "You planned this." "I gave you a chance to choose silence," Elara said. "You chose to explain yourself." His face hardened. "You have no idea what Hollowmere prevented." "Then tell them." Dane looked toward the unseen assembly, toward the capital beyond the hills, and realized he still believed he could win. That belief had always been his weakness. "Hollowmere prevented the kingdom from breaking apart," he said. "The northern governors were funding separatists. Enemy troops were using relief stations to move weapons. If we had admitted civilians were trapped there, the army would have refused to advance." Caelan's jaw tightened. "So you forged military orders. I created the authority you lacked. You murdered healers. I protected millions from civil war." Elara stepped closer. "Did you also order the final ward sealed?" Dane looked at her without regret. "Yes." Sabine's hand moved toward her sword. Caelan stopped her with one glance. Dane continued, almost eager now. "The children had seen enemy prisoners being treated beside royal soldiers. Their testimony would have destroyed the campaign's legitimacy. One ward for an entire kingdom was not a difficult calculation." Across the valley, a third bell rang. The assembly had heard him. Dane finally understood. His hand closed around the ledger. Then he threw it into the river. "You still have nothing." Varkus's roar answered from the tree line. The war beast emerged with Ruth walking beside him. The poison had left him weak, but not broken. His dark fur moved in the evening wind, bare now without armor. Around his neck hung a chain of silver medical tags, dozens of them. The surviving witnesses followed. Dane's archers raised their bows. Caelan stepped between them and the survivors. "Lower your weapons." The men hesitated. Dane pointed at the king. "He no longer commands you." Caelan removed the royal signet from his hand. "You are right." The bridge fell silent. He placed the ring on the stone between them. "I sealed the contradictory reports. I allowed fear of division to matter more than the dead. I gave your lie the protection of my throne." Dine stared at him. Caelan's voice carried through the speaking pipes. "I abdicate effective immediately. I surrender royal immunity and submit myself to public trial for suppressing evidence connected to Hollowmere." Sabine turned sharply. "Caelan," he did not look at her. "If the truth destroys my claim, then my claim deserves to be destroyed." The archers lowered their bows one by one. Diane's control slipped from his face. "You would throw away a kingdom for these people?" Caelan looked toward the survivors. "No. I am returning what was never mine to protect from them." Dane stepped back. His calculation had depended on Caelan defending the throne. Without that defense, there was nothing left to manipulate. Ruth crossed the bridge and handed Elara a narrow glass vial. Inside floated black grains of nightshade stabilized with silver. "We found it in Dane's carriage," she said, "along with the forge orders." Dane reached for the knife beneath his coat. Sabine moved first. She drew her sword but did not strike. She knocked the blade from his hand and forced him to his knees. He looked up at her with disgust. "You forged the first report. Without you, none of this would have been possible." Sabine's face went pale, but she held her ground. "You are right." The admission seemed to wound her more than his accusation. "I lied because I thought I could buy enough time to save people. Then I kept lying because I was afraid the truth would condemn me with you." She removed her captain's insignia and placed it beside Caelan's signet. "I will testify. I will accept judgment." Diane laughed bitterly. "You think confession makes you honorable?" "No," Sabine said. "It makes the dead harder to erase." He tried to rise. The survivors stepped forward, not with weapons, with names. One after another, they spoke the people lost at Hollowmere. Mothers, healers, children, prisoners. Diane looked from face to face, searching for fear and finding none. His plan had failed because he had never believed ordinary people would choose truth when truth carried a cost. He had mistaken silence for agreement and survival for surrender. The royal guard arrived before nightfall. They placed him in chains under the authority of the assembly, not the crown. No one cheered. Elara watched him taken from the bridge while Varka stood behind her, the silver tags resting against his chest. Caelan remained where he had surrendered his ring. When the guards approached him, he extended his hands. Elara looked at the iron restraints. "You knew this would happen. I knew it should. You could have blamed Dane." "I did blame him. For 7 years, that helped me avoid blaming myself." The guard fastened the first cuff. Caelan looked at Elara. "I am sorry." She did not answer. He did not ask her to. 3 months later, the Royal Assembly converted the Eastern Court into the Hollowmere Tribunal. Elara refused every ceremonial title they offered. Instead, she accepted appointment as Chief Civilian Investigator, with authority independent of the Crown and Council. The silver tags were displayed beneath glass, not as relics of war, but as evidence. Lydia's remained with Elara. Sabine testified for 6 days. Her confession led investigators to 2 hidden burial sites and 21 surviving families whose names had been erased from public records. She was stripped of command and sentenced to service under the tribunal's protection division. Diane was convicted of mass murder, falsification of royal orders, attempted destruction of evidence, and conspiracy against the realm. He spent his final hearing insisting that history would prove him necessary. History recorded his words. It also recorded every name he had tried to remove. Caelan pleaded guilty to obstruction and unlawful suppression of testimony. The assembly stripped him of rank, property, and succession rights. He did not appeal. For 2 years, he worked under guard rebuilding clinics in the northern districts and locating families displaced by the war. He sent Elara no letters asking for forgiveness, only reports, supply lists, witness locations, names restored to public records, evidence of work completed when no one was watching. Elara read every page. She answered none of them. Forgiveness came quietly, long before reconciliation. It came when she realized his punishment no longer brought her satisfaction. It came when anger stopped controlling the shape of her days. It came for her own peace, not his release. Reconciliation required more. On the 3rd anniversary of the tribunal, Elara returned to Blackridge Field. The execution yard was gone. In its place stood a rehabilitation sanctuary for war animals and wounded soldiers. Caelan was repairing a fence near the river. His hair had grown longer. The old scar remained. So did the steadiness in his eyes. Though command no longer lived there, Varkas rested beneath an oak tree nearby. When Elara approached, the beast rose and crossed the field. He lowered his head until she could touch the place where the poisoned armor had once rested. Caelan set down his tools. "I heard the tribunal renewed your appointment." "They did. You deserve it. That is not why I came." He waited. Elara removed Lydia's tag from beneath her coat. "I spent years believing justice would return the life I lost." Caelan said nothing. It did not. No, but it gave that life meaning the lie could not take away. She looked toward the sanctuary, the open gates, the people working without uniforms or titles. "I forgive you." His eyes closed briefly. When they opened, he did not step closer. "Thank you. That does not restore what we might have been. I know, and I will not build a future with a man who believes one confession erases 7 years. I know that too." She studied him for a long moment. "Walk with me." It was not a promise. It was not absolution. It was a beginning offered with boundaries intact. They followed the river beyond the sanctuary while Varkas walked between them, no armor on his back and no blood left beneath it. The lesson Holomir left behind was simple. Protecting peace by burying truth does not create peace. It only transfers the cost to people with less power. Accountability begins when we stop asking whether honesty will hurt us and start asking who our silence continues to harm. Would you have forgiven Caelan after everything he did? Or would the years of silence have made reconciliation impossible? Share your reason in the comments, and subscribe for more mature Alpha King stories, where trust is earned through truth, sacrifice, and consistent action.